Hello and welcome to the Business of Storytelling from Moore's Law Media and my very generous sponsor Vimeo, who are the platform with everything you need to make, manage and share brilliant videos at vimeo.com. In this podcast, I, Neil Moore, talk to the leading commissioners and creators of stories across all kinds of mediums to find out how they do it so well and how we can maybe steal some of their secret sauce and do a better job of telling our own stories. And today I have an authentic full-time storyteller, a journalist who has worked for some of the coolest cultural publications and some of the hard-used publications of Singapore and is now the editor-in-chief of Rice Media. Ilyas, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into my sort of usual set of questions to try and extract from you all you know about storytelling, why don't you tell us some of the publications you've worked for, and then for those that haven't heard of Rice Media, which I can't believe is many people, give us the rundown on what Rice Media is and what makes it special.
I would say most of my history has been in the culture side of things. So I started out quite accidentally in Bandwagon, where the only reason why I came to intern at Bandwagon was because I wanted to get free concert tickets.
Well, the price of concert tickets in Singapore, I can't blame you for that.
Exactly. So basically, I just wanted to get concert tickets, go to attend shows for free, and just in turn just write a story for them. So I started Bandwagon without knowing whether I would be a full-time writer, and they pushed me. They found that I was actually writing pretty well, and that's how I stumbled into journalism. If not for Bandwagon, I would say I wouldn't have dived deep into writing and journalism as well. And then I suddenly became an editor, and they pushed me to become a co-editor with a current person who is now my wife.
Oh, that works out in many ways. That worked out well. Cool.
So I was there for like a few years, and then I decided hey, maybe I can try writing in something else other than music. So I went to Coconuts. So Coconuts has been around for quite some time. They've been in Southeast Asia. They've been writing about news and viral happenings and lifestyle features and all that. After that, I went to Asia One, which is full-on newsroom, politics, hard news, fully Singaporean. And after a while, I decided to just try branded content in Rice Media. So when Rice Media put out an ad for branded content editor, I just applied, and for some reason they took me in. And a year after I tried out branded content editing, they thought that actually this guy might be good for the editor-in-chief. So here I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And Rice Media's got quite the footprint. So perhaps you can run us through where does Rice Media live online and who's looking at it?
Okay, so Rice Media is, I would say, confidently as an editor-in-chief, is Singapore's premium creative non-fiction website. And we have been around since 2017. We exist in a space where we are in between current affairs news and full-on hard features, I would say. We really sit in the position where we are a full digital publication where we can focus on creative nonfiction, whether it's through words on the editorial website, or on Instagram, or on Telegram, or on TikTok as well. We're just trying to adapt to any digital platforms that are around. Yeah.
And what kind of following do you have out there?
I would say we reach out to about over 1 million readers across Southeast Asia every month. This cuts across our website, our Instagram, TikTok, social media, as well as other platforms as well. And what we do basically is just reach out to people who want a more discerning. It's a more discerning audience who want to read a little bit more into the current affairs, but it's not really super newsy, where we bring in like fresh angles, fresh insights into things, and it's more long form journalism, I would say, investigative journalism, which not a lot of like publications have done in Singapore.
Yep, and not many continue to do. But this creative non-fiction it feels to me like quite a relatively new term.
Okay.
I'm sure the concept has been around for ages, but I seem to have heard this quite a lot recently. So just define for those that don't know, what do you mean by creative non-fiction?
So creative non-fiction, I would say it is writing about current affairs, about current trends and the things that are happening around the world, but we are delivering it in a very literary way. Something that you'll find in novels, something you'll find in stories, short stories and all that, where we would kind of like deliver hard information, but in a way where you would want to read more through compelling narratives, compelling interviews, compelling profiles of people, where you kind of read it like a as if you're reading like a fiction novel, but the thing is, all these things are actually real, and it's up to us to figure out a way to make it a little bit more interesting. So currently, there's two subsets, which is like news. You're talking about like straight up objective news. This is just delivering the facts, delivering the information. But in Rise, we kind of like deliver all those same facts, but there's a new spin to it. I would say there's a fresh eyes on it. There's a new way to deliver that kind of content where you want to like know more.
And I think it's particularly interesting to brands and businesses because it's a way of presenting factual information with more entertainment value.
Yes, exactly.
Essentially, I think, and who doesn't want that, right? So I have a sort of background of questions that I ask everybody.
Sure.
And so we're going to start with something that might seem obvious, but I think we should be really clear on it, which is, why is storytelling important to you and to Rice Media?
Okay. I think for me personally, because two of my childhood heroes are basically Roald Dahl and Neil Gaiman. Yeah. So Roald Dahl basically formed my inspiration for the first half of my childhood. Neil Gaiman, when I came across his graphic novels, so Sandman, even his novels, American Gods and all that. So the thing that I kind of realize on hindsight right now, I would say Roald Dahl and Neil Gaiman, both of them have focused on stories that are about storytelling. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because storytelling is the oldest form of craft, one of the oldest form of craft. People were just sitting over campfires, telling each other stories, building worlds for other people. And that kind of like resonated with me a little bit on how we can just use words to create this like whole universe for other people, and they don't need to walk out of the country or like just have things to imagine about it. For Rise itself, I would say it's a war against mediocrity, I think. It's pretty strong, yes.
Yeah,
it's very strong.
Quite the statement.
It's quite a statement, but I would say we are trying to like, because the thing I realized about, because I worked in Coconuts, I worked in Asia One, I worked in other places for over a decade. I realized the Singapore audience, or the audience in general, we are kind of reaching out to just the lowest common denominator. The things that always go viral are always the things that just really surface level things. Just talking about like, oh, here's a thing that's happening in this shopping center. It's a fire. There's someone running from a duck. That kind of stuff. Right. Those kind of things always go viral. Then what make me like kind of like reflect a little bit, like, why do Singaporeans just want to read all this stuff? what we want to do at Rise is to actually add value, add utility, add some worth to the stories that you're reading. For example, what does a man being chased by a crocodile at Sungai Buloh Nature Park, what does it say about like our treatment, like our behavior towards animals in Singapore, that kind of stuff. There's always a bigger commentary to be made. There's always a bigger relevance and context for Rise to make regarding anything, politics, culture, lifestyle, all these things. Kind of like the thing that I always tell the team is that how do we make content smarter for the Singapore audience, and how do we make Singaporeans think a little bit more beyond just the usual, hey, there's this sale happening going on at Jurong Mall, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So this is intriguing because I think there are marketers who are wondering, how do I distract people from looking at this stuff to try and come and spend some time looking at my stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. But also, I think there's another voice. There's sort of the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other, going, but people don't want to. They want silly, mediocre, lowest common denominator stuff. And I think there's a battle going on there. So you seem to have sort of squared that. You've managed to build an audience of 1 million people for stuff which has a bit more depth and a bit more value, which I think there are certain cynics out there that might think there's not an audience for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Is creative nonfiction, the idea of packaging factual stories as entertainment through creative, sort of creatively expressing them, is that the vehicle that you use to do that?
I would say that is the main North Star, I would say, for the rest of the team. For example, I would like when I speak to our content producing team, they would say, okay, these are the things that would make people kind of like pay attention to our content. And these are the things that we want to do, like smarter content, more intellectual, more, I would say, full-on creative nonfiction. How do we kind of like come together, combine those elements together to create a certain formula that would kind of fit Rise Media and also fit the Singaporean general audience? That kind of stuff.
So what have you found? And I got to relate a story. I was at South by Southwest in Sydney this week. And they had a panel of women who'd built media brands over social media. One of the things one of them discovered is she was a chef, and she was making cooking content. And they made this discovery that slow motion cheese grating is the hook. Actually, anytime we start a video with slow motion cheese grating, you see the cheese curls coming off, people come in. So are there any sort of hard and fast rules you've discovered that you know that if we have that or that combination of elements in a story, that's more likely to bring them in? What are the kind of rules you have?
I think for me, I would kind of like split it into like two separate aspects of it. So if I want, there's quantity, there's quality. Like you said, there's two devils and angels on your shoulders, right? There's quantity and there's quality. For my job is to kind of like bring them both together. But from my own personal experience, quantity is always about something hooky. The headline is always snappy, concise, and immediately tells you what exactly the story is about while enticing you to trying to find out a little bit more. And those headlines always are different for different platforms. For example, for us, on our website, it would be a specific headline. On Facebook, it'll be that headline. On Instagram, it'll be a even shorter headline because we found out there's a certain limit to the number of characters and the actual content itself. On TikTok, it'd be even shorter. There might not even be a title. There's just a caption. That's it. And what we would do is kind of like pass those different things between different platforms. The actual magic, I would say, is I would always boil it down to four things. 4 or 5 things. There's always utility. There's always brevity. There's always resonance. There's always timeliness. There's always freshness, I would say. So the freshness, I would say, it would be our USP, which is we will honestly, whatever Rice is talking about or whatever we report about, everyone else is talking about it. CNA has already reported about it. Mothership has already talked about it a little bit. But how do we kind of like take that same angle and kind of like give it a different spin, stuff?
So you're not breaking news, but you're taking news and putting a different angle on it.
Yes.
That is uniquely Rice, but also uniquely Rice plus Instagram.
Yes, exactly.
Or uniquely Rice plus TikTok or whatever the platforms are.
Yeah.
How many people does it take to do that?
You'll be surprised at how small the Rice team is.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that's what we want. I think the concern is that, I mean, I see the sheer volume of stuff you put out and the sheer range. I mean, the formats are really a lot, and we'll get to that because you said it, quantity versus quality. You put out a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Which is all on brand for Rice, which is interesting in and of itself. But I think for a lot of brands seem to be, I don't know if they're over-engineering or over-staffing or overthinking their content, but it seems to take an awful lot of people an awful long time to churn out a very small amount of content. What are they doing wrong?
Okay.
Or what could they be doing better?
I would say the overthinking gets in the way of fundraising. Sometimes when there's always a saying, too many cooks spoil the broth, right? The thing is, sometimes you don't really have to plan that much. I mean, obviously there is a set template for you to figure out. But for me, what I would tell the team is always like, okay, we haven't tried this before. I'll give you a space. I'll give you some space for you to kind of fail, like a safe space for you to just try things out. If it works, awesome. Let's take what we know from that tactic. Let's take what we know from that strategy and adapt it to what we would do. If it fails, if it doesn't get as much traffic, doesn't get as much views or impact, let's try to learn what exactly went wrong with that. The thing is, for when we have too big a team for that, there's so many voices trying to chime in like, oh, I think this worked because this, I think this didn't work because of this. But when there's such a small, lean team for you to navigate through, changes can happen immediately. Like, let's say this week we try, let's try putting in like lesser text on our Instagram pictures. Let's try using this certain color. And if it works, it works. Let's try to do that. If it doesn't, then we immediately, at the end of the week, we know what exactly not to do for the next week.
And how are you recording all of that knowledge and sharing it? I mean, because again, within my experience of working with brands and marketers and stuff like that, there's a lot of Excel, there's a lot of PowerPoint, there's a lot of, tearing our hair out trying to understand things and sitting in meeting rooms.
It's a Google Docs.
Right.
Yeah, the Google Docs. So we all share like a certain, we all share like a single document for us to say what went wrong, what went wrong, and what went right every month. So
that's great.
Yeah, what we would do is every end of the month, we would have AARs, after action reviews. We will go through each and every single story, post, whatever done. Look at the numbers. Look at the engagement, comments. What's the feel? What's the temperature like? What are the click-through rates? That kind of stuff. For me, data is always super important. This is what I learned from my years in the newsroom, my years in Coconuts Asia One. Numbers are always, at the end of the day, people just want to pay attention to numbers, and that's what I will pay attention to. If it doesn't, if there's a certain threshold that, if I set a certain threshold for them to decide what's bad, what's mid, and what's good, and we will kind of like try to discuss among ourselves every end of the month to see, okay, this is why it went well. How do we do more of that? This is what went bad. How do we do less of that? It's always an open discussion.
Right now, be it for Singapore or for Southeast Asia, are you seeing any emerging sort of topic trends? And I'll give you an example on a very micro level. It's like within our industry, the marketing and advertising and comms industry, AI everybody's talking about AI all the time, right? It's a simple sort of trend to identify. Have you noticed any trends as of right now, which is October 2023? What's hot?
I mean, the thing about AI for me is that everyone loves to talk about it because the only people, and I would say the only people who talk about it would be us. I would say media professionals, media professionals.
Because we're frightened for our jobs.
Because we are frightened for our jobs. Honestly, I've tried writing a few content with AI, and sometimes it does work pretty well. Like for certain things, as long as you know how to edit and all that. But for the rest of the world, the rest of the people on the street, the rest people who are like just trying to survive on like whatever amounts of whatever salary that they're making. People on the ground, if you ask them about AI, they have no reason to care about it, and they don't see why they should care about it. For us, we see it because we feel that AI could really take over whatever we do best. There's a human element to it. But for them, for the rest of the people on the ground, the people that Rise Media have talked to on the ground, they don't really care, and that kind of like gives us a pause to reflect a little bit on like okay, what do certain like big changes in the world actually mean for the people who are actually doing like I would say blue collar work, that kind of stuff. I mean, we can try to like show them that okay, AI is gonna take over like some manufacturing jobs, some factory operations, that kind of stuff. But for them, they would just be like, okay, so I would still be okay, right? I can still do some other stuff.
But the story is not about AI itself; it's about the impact.
It's an impact. It's always.
I see a lot of startups right now pitching themselves as whatever .ai.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure the .ai is perhaps as compelling if it's a consumer offering as you think it might be. It's about the impact of what you're doing. How do you know? This is partly down to sort of journalistic experience and instinct, but how do you know what makes a great story? Let's qualify that for Rice. And if you have to churn out a story and it's not a great story, how do you make it a story for Rice? With your angle, your approach, your treatment of it. So the two questions are: how do you know it's a good story? And then if it's good or not, how do you make it a Rice story?
Okay. For me, it's always let's say someone pitches me a story about, I wanna dedicate a history about this this specific song that's been adapted as a secret society chant, that kind of stuff.
That was weird. Specific. Did you do this? Is this a story?
On the download, yes, we are doing.
Okay, I was gonna say it's pretty specific. All right,
yes.
cool.
So so the key for me is always specificity, resonance, and evergreenness, I would say. If let's say someone in the future will read about it, they can always come back to it like, oh, this is how this is still relevant to me right now. The thing that I always wanna like preach to the team is that how do they actually create a story that has a sort of like impact. So let's say they pitch something that is like totally just for the sake of churning, right?
Right.
It'll just be like, let's say someone said something in Parliament today. How do we turn that into a story? The thing, and I think the planning portion would involve us discussing a lot more on like, okay, so what? Like they will say like every time I have to like ask them, okay, so what? That means it's not a good enough story, that kind of stuff. So for example, like
that's quite a good editorial value to have. I mean, in a brand, I think it was Coca-Cola many years ago, sort of adopted content as quite a large part of their approach. And I think that was one of their 7 news values. It was, if I didn't work for Coca-Cola, would I care about this?
Exactly.
Sort of so what values. So yeah, I think that's quite a valuable one to take. And I think it's one of the ways you can perhaps, when you're working inside an organization, where you can become quite sort of institutionalized,
it's
quite
always
myopic.
insular.
That's quite a good way of trying to attain a sort of outside perspective.
Yes.
So what? Would I care about this if I didn't work here?
Yeah.
So I think that's quite valuable thing to consider.
Yeah. That's always like what I would ask people, ask the team when they pitch, or even freelancers. They would like reach out to us like, hey, I want to talk about this like Japanese sports team, a Japanese football team who's making it big in Singapore. And the pitch would always be half done, I would say. So in the planning process, I will always keep asking, so what, until that pitch is like really sharp, and then I'll say like, okay, let's go for this. Sorry. That kind of stuff.
When someone's pitching you stuff as well, how do you make the decision as to what say? Because not all your stories appear on every platform, you know. And I happen to get most of your stuff through Instagram.
Yeah.
And just as a sort of side note, what I find intriguing now, I come to think about it with your Instagram stories, is how much I read without realizing I'm reading, because I feel like I'm just flicking through a bunch of pictures, but you have a lot of text on each. Before you know it, you've read like 150 words, but it didn't feel like you were reading an article. I think that's a really clever format. I don't know if you have a name for that format, but it's something I'm going to adopt and try out and then do with this podcast, which is kind of cool. But how do you decide if a story is a video, a one-off, a series, a TikTok, an Instagram, all of the above? I mean, do you have a checklist, or what's the decision-making process?
Yeah, that's interesting. It always begins from in the pitching room. Every story will always have I always have two things in mind. Does this need a strong visual presentation, and does this actually need additional layers of elements to it? So the thing I would say is, when a story feels like there's a scale to it and there's an impact to it, I would think, does it need so many words to it? Does it just need to be just a photo essay where there's a lot of photos and the words are just pretty minimal to it? If it's a video, then I would say you would always include a little bit of like narrative element where you need a host or you need like further investigation. For the video side of things, there wouldn't be. It's always different from the editorial side of things. So when you have a video, it's always a different angle than the editorial, and the angle is always different from the social media side of things. The checklist I would have is whether the topic itself is strong enough to just be super visual, in terms of like, let's say we are talking about, we are like trying to investigate a story about I would say buskers in Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah. If there is a story about buskers in Singapore, do we need actual video of it? Do we need more footage? Do we need more original photography on it? I would say not really, because first of all, most of the images and visuals are already available online. Secondly, the only thing it depends on the angle of the story. The angle of the story we did for a story about buskers is that we were focusing on one specific person and his impact towards the other community. So all we needed to do was to get his visuals and then some evidence of his like wrongdoing to the other community as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I mean, take buskers. That's a good one. I mean, there's so many angles you could take.
Yes.
You could do the history of busking.
In
we
Singapore.
could do policy on busking. We can do the compensation of buskers. We could do the rights of buskers if you record their content.
Yes.
You know, there's so many angles we could take on it. So you've got to, you've got to really understand, and this is a point I'm trying to make to brands, which is you got to really understand your brand's point of view, your brand's perspective on a story, and that helps you decide the angle.
Correct.
You know, you shouldn't actually have that many choices if you kind of know who you are and what your perspective on the world is. And then judging that on its own merit. Many years ago, I used to do some work with my old agency, Click to View, with Visa. And one of the things I admired most about their approach to content was they never specified, we need 20 videos and 30 blogs and 50 Instagram posts. They would go, we have a story, we have a pot of money, how should we tell this story? What's the best way to tell this story? And they were very open to, this is a video, this is an article, this is a photo story or whatever. I think a lot of brand briefs I see are very prescriptive about, the medium or the number of assets they want, rather than what's the best story and the best way to tell it.
Because the way that we work with brands, I would say we would approach it, because brands approach us for a specific direction, a specific way for us to like approach the thing that they want to deliver to an audience. Other publications, I would say they would just go for mass, go for reach and all that. For us, I would say we would put in a little bit more thought, a little bit more measured responses and measured ways for us to deliver a specific brand message, I would say. For example, I did a story, because I was a branded content editor, I did a story for AIA. They're trying to sell insurance policies for high net worth individuals. Yeah. And for me, the thought process was that, okay, why would everyone else in Singapore care about rich people? The whole battle between like the hoi polloi and the 1% and all that, especially in Singapore, where it's always very highly polarizing, like the elites and the lower class.
Not even the lower class. I think the elites are in many cases so far up the economic sort of chain.
Yes.
I wouldn't count myself necessarily as sort of hoi polloi or or anything else, but just sort of regular folk, the rest of us basically.
Yes,
all
exactly.
kind of the same.
Even regular folk are against like the 1%ers and all that. So the way I approach it is that how do we like combine both sides together? How do we unite that? So I found a guy who is basically a multi-millionaire, but he lives in a HDB flat in Jurong, and he refuses to move out. And his car is a Hyundai or another small sedan, so much so that when he stops at near roadsides, people will think like, oh, you're my Grab, right?
Well, little do they know he owns Grab or something. But I like that. It's a different angle, and I think sort of route one is to go, let's get a beautiful rich person and talk about how very successful they've been and how AIA has helped them. But actually,
which is not wrong, I would say.
It's not wrong, but it's not necessarily as quirky or interesting or compelling or looky or whatever. And like you said, maybe the beautiful person with the Lamborghini, maybe that's an Instagram story. It looks great. It's about perfect lives and gorgeous lives.
Yeah. Visually strong. Yeah.
Yeah, but we got to consider all those options. And I would suggest, maybe not pick one, but go, well, look, we don't know necessarily what's going to resonate. And we don't, and maybe different things will resonate with different people on different platforms. Exactly. So maybe we need to tell more than one story, which is something I'm quite big on, is that, like I said earlier, a lot of brands, they want that guaranteed hit single. They want to do one thing once and it be a massive hit. And I think they get promised that by a lot of vendors and agencies and people like me.
Yeah.
And with enough research and strategy and whatever, we can do it. But the fact of the matter is, the best content creators in the world, the New York Times and the, people like that, even they don't always know what's going to work. And they're constantly producing way more stories than they have hits. And I think this is well understood in sort of the VC world. We understand that VCs back 100 companies on the basis that one will go stellar, 5 will break even, and the rest will probably fail. I think we need to look at content that way. And I think a lot of brands are obsessed with innovation.
Yes.
They seem to accept this model of innovation within tech, accept it within content, You can give yourself the best chance and you can study the numbers, you can improve. But, even the Beatles had to write how many songs in their career to get 20 number ones? That's the way I look at it. Yeah. So, and practice makes perfect. And that's possibly why working with someone who does this for a living is a good idea to create branded content.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about expectations, right? About the whole relationship between clients and publishers and marketers and storytellers and all that. Because when brands kind of like pay good money, for example, to a marketer or to a publisher to promote their key message and all that, they always have that thinking that, oh, for this kind of like money I'm paying, I should be getting like this great content because I've seen how you do content for like other for other brands or maybe for your own content and all that. But like you said, like it's always a huge gamble when you go for a specific angle or a specific strand or direction for the key message for the thing that you want to promote, and it would always actually take a lot of like practices. At the end of the day, we are just like trying to throw things at the wall and see what sticks, and we take what sticks and put it back into like our best practices.
And the more you throw, the more likely you're to work that out.
Exactly.
So I've got two more questions for you. So one is, I've seen hints of you talked about having small teams that feed back. You have pitching sessions, you have checklists. So I'm seeing there's the potential for us to learn some best practice here. So can you perhaps describe for me the process of how a story gets from concept to consumer? What is your process?
Okay. So for us, it always begins from the actual workflow and structure of how we do our content. So for me, there's always like a 3-tier structure for us. There's the planning, there's drafting, and then there's the delivery.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the planning stage, I would say that would take about 50% of the entire process.
Right.
Because the planning is always the crucial bit. You need to sharpen your pitch, you need to sharpen your the language you use, and you really need to do a lot of research into a specific issue, I would say. Okay, for example, we did an expose about a specific busker in Orchard who's been calling the cops on like other buskers along Orchard because he doesn't like them. He just wants all the money to come to him.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So it's a story that, for example, this story was just published a few months ago, but this story was pitched way earlier in the year 2023. And the way that we stumbled on it was we were trying to do a story on something else, just a specific Facebook post about like the authorities and buskers disagreeing on something. In researching into the story, we found out, hey, there's another angle that we can go, and it's a lot more interesting, and it's a lot more, I would say, juicy for the audience, for the Singapore audience.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
You know, juicy's good.
Yeah. So a lot of the process actually involves in the research stage, in the interviewing stage, while talking to people, going on the ground and all that. That's where you find the best hooks. That's where you find the best stories. For us to kind of like flesh out a little bit, develop, kind of like dive into it. If what I would tell the writers, the content producers, is that if it's not going to interest me, like if your pitch is not going to interest me, how is it going to interest the rest of our Singapore audience or Southeast Asian audience?
But a story that at first does not interest you could be made to interest you through development.
Yeah. Correct. So I would say I'm not super into it, but I see like a strand or like a potential for us to like kind of expand a little bit more, do a little bit more research, and that's what my writer did. Yeah.
Okay. So we go from planning into drafting.
Drafting, yes. So in the planning stage, so we've done all the interviews. They will always deliver me a content outline. There's always the bones of the story because I would always equate this to chefs will always have like different ingredients at the ready before they start cooking, right?
Right.
So talking about prep, cooking, presentation, same thing for content as well. The prep is the research, get everything done, get everything in place, all the assets are done. How do we kind of like deliver that into something that's palatable? In the drafting process, there's two at least. There's always the first draft and the second draft. The first draft, it would be horrible.
Always, no matter how good the writer, right?
It's always horrible. It's very rare for you to get like a perfect first draft.
This, by the way, this is my. I mean, I think a lot of people have fear of the blank page.
Yes.
And my fear, which I have, and I'm someone who probably creates a lot more than your average person. I just want it to be perfect first time. I don't want to write a word so I know it's the right word, but it's never the right, it never will be the right word. And yet I've been doing this for 25 years, and yet every time I sit down, I still I still hope
Exactly.
that it will just come out right first time, and it never
yeah.
does. But I think you've got to make your peace with that. That is the process. There's no getting around it. There's no, even if you get ChatGPT to do it,
Yes.
it's still a first draft. You're still going to have to go back and, writing's rewriting and all
Yeah,
that.
that's the thing I always tell people is that whether it's video, social media, editorial, your first draft is going to be horrible. I will feedback the hell out of it. Like on Google Docs, cliche, this is stupid. I did say that.
In constructive terms, I'm sure.
Yeah, so this, I need you to rephrase this, and all that stuff.
So what gets it from second draft to presentable? What are the new elements that get added?
Okay, so it has to have a proper structure. So we're talking like storytelling technicals, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be like visuals have to be within already. Visuals have to support whatever's inside the copy. Obviously the basics are the grammar, language, tone. Those are the same. For me, I think the big one that I always wanna edit for is flow and structure. Everything has to transition well. Everything has to be readable. The hook immediately has to grab you from the start. If the rest of the story is great, but you can't capture people at the start right there, there's no use for you to...
I find this is a particular problem with press releases.
Yes.
Where there's so much preamble, as a leading provider of blah, blah, blah solutions, established in Singapore since we're like, get to the point. I've got 30 of these on my desk. Get to the damn point.
You always, for me, the first sentence always has to be, why should you care about it? Or like, it has to be bombastic enough, or like huge or bold enough for you to like, oh my God, yes. This is what I have thought. This is what I have thought, but I never really articulated it that well. How do we kind of like do that for people? So when they read it, they'll be like, oh my God, like, yeah, this is exactly what I think. That all goes back into hook resonating, and freshness, I would say.
Was it freshness, timeliness, and brevity?
Yeah, definitely.
See, I remember, I've locked it in already. So in the briefest terms, how long does that process take, and how many of those processes are going on at any one time?
Okay. How long it would take? It always depends on the scale and the length of the story. If the scale of the story deserves, let's say, 2 months of investigation, 2 months of talking to people, authorities, we would usually maximum, I would say, a good story would take about 3 months from conception to publishing live. And that's for like our kind of journalism. I will always set like a 3-month maximum.
So 6 weeks, 50% of that is developing. So 6 weeks of developing.
Yeah, the research will always be 2 months. I would say.
Yeah.
The rest of it will just be writing it. Yeah, because you have all the information, you just write it out.
Well, this is like, I mean, I do some screenwriting and stuff like that, and you want to believe it's sitting down and then interior day. It's not. It's sitting down and going, scene 1, this has to happen. I need an inciting incident here, and you what they call beat it out with all the beat. And actually, you have to have the whole thing written in very mechanical terms before you can then start adding all your lovely prose to it.
That's why the first draft is always horrible, because it sounds like, because when you set that high expectation, like the first draft is gonna be like, this is exactly what I want to read. This is exactly what I want people to walk away with. But then once they send it to me, they will see like, oh, okay, this is what I'm missing. This doesn't make sense. Like stuff.
Well, they always say when you're writing creatively or just for fun, you must always have a group of people you share it with, and you really don't, because you don't want to do the work of going back to do it. But that's what it takes. How many sort of stories at any one time in that process?
So I would say once we start a story, it would just be an ongoing process, and then because it would take a few, like let's say a week, a month or 2, and then the next week there'll be another new story for them to work on. Then there'll be next week. Then there's new story to work
So
on.
how many drafts are you reading a week?
I would say about 6 editorials, and on top of that, there'll be other drafts I need to get through. Video drafts, social media drafts. So personally, I would be about like in the good 20
Okay.
range.
So what I'm trying to get to is, so if you've got 20 pieces of content a week that you're reviewing in draft, my maths isn't great, but if we times that by, you're allowed 2 weeks holiday. So if we times that by 50 weeks a year, that's the kind of volume. Obviously, you're a publication. It's not. It's your full-time job to create content.
It is.
But I think that's maybe not what's necessarily appreciated by marketers and brands. And although that might be an unachievable volume, I think the idea of having a constant number of stories constantly flowing through and knowing that not all of them will work, it's a publishing mindset. But I think once you get into it, it's very achievable. I mean, you look at even influencers who, they're 1- and 2-man bands, and yet they're managing to put out a consistent amount of content because they're constantly working on it. I often say the difference between sort of content creators and brands is that brands they don't really enjoy making content. If they could spend the money on something else, they would. They want to spend as little money and do as little as possible to get the one piece out. Whereas an instinctive content creator wakes up in the morning and just like, wow, my breakfast looks amazing. Let me get my camera out and let's make a film about my breakfast. Like they can't make enough content. It's a passion, and I think you got to find the passion for it.
Yeah.
The last question I'm going to ask you, ask everybody, which is, you get to tell a lot of stories for a living. What's the one story you've not yet been able to tell that you want to?
We live in Singapore.
We do.
We do. And people will be surprised by the kinds of stories that you might not be able to deliver in public. I don't want to get to the weeds, but there are there are certain topics where it's just makes sense for you not to touch. I would say when you want to talk about the really, really deep level stuff, let's say the truth about racism in Singapore. The truth about, because there are many truths in Singapore that we hold very dear: multiculturalism, democracy, other certain aspects of Singapore that make it to the Singapore's pledge, national pledge. The thing that people the thing that people don't really see that well is that a certain group of people in Singapore only see those in black and white. You're either against us or you're with us. If you don't agree with these certain tenets, that means you are against the state, that kind of stuff. The thing that I think I would want to kind of like try to introduce a little bit more to Singaporeans is that there is room for nuance in the things that we talk about. That nuance doesn't deserve to be immediately talked down, removed away from public conversation, censored, that kind of stuff.
I think you can be critical and still be patriotic.
Exactly.
One of the things that I've been here for 15 years. My wife is Singaporean Chinese. My daughter goes to local school. And yet, as an expat, I'm not allowed to ever complain. If you don't like it, go home then. But I said, well, hold on a minute. I pay my taxes and I love living here, and I've built businesses here and I've employed people here. I think I've earned the right. I've paid 15 years of taxes. I think I've earned the right to sort of say, you know what? There are certain aspects that I'm maybe not so keen on, but I still consider myself very lucky and very grateful to live here. But I think, one can be critical. I don't think that's...
Yeah, there's a thing about black and white. It's like once, like, for example, I don't know, I can't speak from the expat's perspective, but I'm sure you also have kind of like faced that kind of like backlash every time and there's this certain line where you don't want to cross, because once you cross it, you will receive a certain amount of hate from like people online, from maybe I would say even people that that you kind of like a bit more guarded on your criticism.
Yeah, well, I think to me it's about being constructive. I think the problem with social media is it becomes very inflammatory, very reactionary.
Very binary.
And actually, almost nothing in life is black and white. Everything's a little bit nuanced. But we can't consider everybody's individual circumstances a point of view when you're scrolling through 5,000 comments. But that is way beyond my pay grade and the remit of this podcast. So I'm going to say thank you for sharing some really solid takeaways, and I'm going to sort of isolate those and share those so that other people can benefit. I appreciate all your experience, and I hope we'll get to talk again.
Yes, thank you so much, Neil. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching or indeed listening to The Business of Storytelling from Moore's Law Media and our generous sponsor, Vimeo, which is the platform for making, managing and sharing brilliant video content at vimeo.com. Check them out. They're not just the indie YouTube anymore, you know. If you liked it, please like, share, comment, argue. Don't know what else you can do. Maybe you can poke me. Is that still a thing? I don't know. But we've got plenty more online. So check us out on all the usual podcast platforms, on Vimeo, of course, and all across social. And all the best with your storytelling.